Hello YouTube, my name is Nye, you join me in the Finale Guitar Shop in Sheffield and you are watching Folk Friend, your one-stop shop for Celtic backing guitar tutorials. In today's video I'm going to be running you through how to accompany the Kesh Jig by ear. We're going to be looking at techniques for how you can find chords for tunes that you don't know yet, just using a little bit of music theory and your ear training skills. And I'm also going to be showing you a really handy movable chord shape with the root notes on the A string in DADGAD tuning, which hopefully will combine with the movable shape I showed you in the first part of this series to give you pretty much every chord voicing you could ever need. Before we start looking at how to accompany this tune, I've put a little link in the corner of the screen there to my play-along video for the Kesh Jig. This is a free video, it loops the tune at 3 different speeds, it starts out really slowly. So what I suggest you do is get that up in another tab and then you'll be able to practice the things that we're talking about throughout this video by just jamming along with the tune there. Before we get into the video, just a quick plug. I'm celebrating the release of my new book. You can find that in the corner of the screen, and everything that I'm going to be covering in this series is based on the material covered in that book. So if you want a complete guide to accompanying Irish, Scottish, Welsh tunes using just your ears and music theory knowledge and the lovely sounds of DADGAD tuning, then go and check that out. You can find it on the Folk Friend shop in the corner of the screen. So the first thing whenever you listen to a tune is to work out what sort of tune it is. Is it major, is it minor, or is it Mixolydian? Major type tunes sound bright and happy and cheery. Minor type tunes sound more kind of dark and gloomy and moody and miserable. And Mixolydian tunes have a kind of jazz hands, bluesy kind of twinge to them. So if I'll just whistle the first little part of the tune. You can hear straight away it's not got any jazz hands, it's not dark and miserable, it's definitely in a major key. And the next step after that is to go through the chords that you know and work out which major key it is. So pretty much folk tunes are generally either in D major, G major, A major, very occasionally C major. That covers the bulk of them, those 4 keys. And if you look at a circle of fifths, C, G, D, A, that's 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock on the circle. Let's just go through that little list. That doesn't sound right. That's D. Let's try A. No. Let's try C. Getting closer but still not really. And let's try G. Yeah, that sounds a lot more right. So that's always the first thing you need to do, and generally when you get to the end of the tune or the ends of sections, the chord that sounds rightest at the ends is the chord that is the key chord for the whole tune. So we know our key is G. The next thing we need to know is what are our main chords in the key, and the way you work that out is you go through the alphabet and you find chords 1, 4 and 5. So if we're starting on G, G is chord 1, G, A, B, C is going to be chord 4 and D is chord 5. In DADGAD tuning, if we want a G chord, we can use the slidable shape that I talked about in the previous part of this series. We put it on G bass note, so it looks like this. Now, DADGAD is very well suited to playing in D. It's slightly less well suited to playing in other keys to greater or lesser degrees, and that's because of the open strings. So if you look at this G shape, my top 2 strings are currently open, and they are an A and a D. That top string being a D, that's great, that's in the chord, that can stay. But the string below being an A, there's no A in a G chord. Now you might like the kind of slightly jangly sound that gives you. Personally, I think it's quite nice. That gives you a G add 9 chord for the people taking notes. But if you want to get rid of that and make it into a note which is definitely firmly in the root chord of G, just add your little finger on the, not the top string, but the one next door, so the high A string, and put that finger on the same fret as whatever the bottom finger is on. and that will always give you the chord's fifth. You can use this for any chord as well. If you're using the slidable shape, no matter where you put it, if you want to make it more definite in itself, then just put your little finger on the top A string on the same fret as the root note, and that will always add an extra fifth to the chord. So anyway, I'm going to use this as my G root note. It's like a G chord with a little finger added there. Nice. For C, I'm going to use this new slidable shape. My middle finger is always going to do the root note, and my index finger is going to add the third, which makes the chord major or minor. So if I want a C chord, I put my middle finger on C, 3rd fret of the A string, and then I'm going to add my index finger on the 2nd fret of the D string, not the lowest pitched D string, the middle of the 3 D strings, like that. That gives me a C major chord, and if I wanted to make a C minor chord, I'd move the index finger back one. That's quite a big stretch, and if your fingers haven't been doing as much yoga as mine have, then you can use your ring finger for the root note instead. So that would give you C minor. The really good thing with this shape is, so long as you're in a key where the top couple of strings kind of more or less harmonise with the root note, which is great for D and G, you can use either of these two shapes to make major or minor chords. So if I want a G chord, I've got it there. I could also get one way up here, because there's a G root note there. I'll put my finger on it and I'll put my major third on the string next door, 1 fret behind, and that would give me a kind of G chord. So I've got 2 options now for my G. So you can move this anywhere, as long as you've got the right kind of third, it'll work nicely for whatever your chosen chord is. My chord 5 in the key of G is D major, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my nice slidable shape and I'm just going to shift it up 2 frets, and that's going to give me a nice full sounding D chord. This D chord does have an extra note in it in the G string. It's a D add 11 chord. We're not going to worry about that, it still sounds fine. All good, we'll just leave it. First listen through the tune then. What you need to work out is where chords 1, 4 and 5 go, and whether there's any sections where a certain chord is really definitely kind of required by the melody. And this tune is kind of unusual in that right out the gate in the 2nd bar of the tune there's a bit which really clearly kind of shouts for a certain chord. So the tune goes like this. That's the kind of first half of the first A part. If we think in terms of foot taps, a bar is 2 foot taps. That much, that's a bar. We've got always the first chord at the beginning of the tune. That's the first rule of folk music pretty much. And we know that every 7th foot tap is going to be chord 5. The first time you get to that, it'll stay on chord 5 for 2 taps, and the second time it'll be the end of a section, so it'll go from chord 5 back to chord 1, and that'll make the section sound finished. So I'm just going to hum the tune, and I'm going to put up the numbers. That's where chord 5 goes. Then it kind of goes round again. This time 5 back to 1, that's your little ending phrase. After that, that's one complete A part, and then the A part repeats, so it does exactly the same thing again. Like that, and it's exactly the same framework for the repeat. All we need to do now then is go through and listen carefully and hear if there's any parts where the tune kind of feels like it's moved away from the home bass. Those parts are normally where chord 4 goes. So the tune's kind of like there's that little jump up, and it very much sounds like it's shifted, it's moving up. That would be a chord 4 section. Chord 5, the 7th foot tap, back to home, So it's kind of like home, home, away, 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 chord 5, home, home, away, 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 chord 5, home. And chord 5 is always like your portal to come back to where you started. So our kind of basic structure for the tune, the A part at least, is like this. However, the second bar, 2/3 of that bar is A. So really, because so much of that bar is A, it'll sound a lot better if you match it by playing A minor there. Like that. So that gives us a basic chord structure for the A part, which is something like this. Now let's have a listen to the B part and see if that does the same or something different. The B part goes... then chord 5. Something like that. So you've got home, away, da 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 da, home, da da da, chord 5, da da dum, home, da 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 da, away, da 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 dum, still away, debatably, da da dum, chord 5 back to 1, something like that. And that's your structure for the B part, and then it repeats all of that. Now you can practice playing along with that. That is the default chord progression that it shows you on the play-alongs as well. If you look at the karaoke chords on the screen, you can practice jamming along with those. Let's have a quick little look at how we could make that more interesting using little chord runs of that slidable shape that I mentioned before. So if we've got G, A minor, C, D, this is our progression for the A part. What we can do to make that more fluid sounding is link the chords together using the intervening steps in the chord scale. So from G to A minor, I've gone up one step in the scale, G to A. From A minor up to C, which is the next chord in the progression, there's 2 steps there. So what I'm going to do is just fill in the little stepping stone by hitting B minor on my way through. And that's nice and easy to do because from my A minor chord with one finger, I can do B minor also with one finger, and then just slide into C. So I'm going to go... like that. You can always do that anytime you've got 2 main chords in your chosen progression and they're separated by 1 or more steps. You can fill in the gaps in between, so long as the main beats where the chord should come in still have the right chord on. The sort of less important beats between those can be filled by sliding between those 2 main chords. One other thing that you can do as well, I call casing, which is a term that I've borrowed and then applied inaccurately from jazz music. What I mean by this is, as well as linking up 2 chords which are separated by 1 step, you can also skip some of the steps and just hit the following chord from 1 step either side. So if I was going from G to C, as I would be in the B part of this tune, G, C, G, D, I could hit the C from either 1 step below from B minor, or actually from 1 step above from D. Now generally I tend to reserve chord 5 if I'm playing in a major key for only being in chord 5 sections, which is the 7th foot tap. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit my C coming up from B minor. So something like that. What I've done there is I've taken what was previously 2 foot taps of G. The first foot tap's the important one because it's the start of the section. and the second one I've put in my casing chord, which leads me into the C from one step below. You can do that with any chord in the tune. If I wanted to case the chord 5 at the end of the section, I could do it like this. I'm going to go like that. So this time there's 2 chord 1 foot taps before that D. I've made that into 1 chord 1 foot tap, and then 1 where I'm going into D from a step above. So I'm going into D from E minor, just using my simple slidable shape again. Like that. So this is a really nice technique to play around with. Try it in all your chord progressions. It'll pretty much always work, so long as you're using chords from the current key. I've talked about those lots in previous videos. You can check out my guide to music theory, which is linked in the box down below if you want to know more about that. Or get yourself an amazing mode wheel, which basically memorises it all for you. It's also all in the book, quick and easy ways to memorise that kind of useful stuff. What notes are in keys, what chords go with those notes, how the modes work, etc, etc, etc. That is it from me for today. I will be back next week telling you a little bit about substitutions and how they work. I will also be looking at some other tunes and showing some examples from a recent little jam session I had with my mum. So that'll be showing you kind of how you can put this into practice in all sorts of different ways, just using really simple, generally 2 or 3 finger chord shapes. If you've enjoyed this video, please do give me a like, a subscribe, leave me a comment. Always nice to hear from people, and if you click the little bell next to the subscribe icon, you will be notified when I post further instalments in this series. If you're in the Sheffield area, call in the shop and say hello. We're open 10 till 5 every day except Wednesday, and if you're not, you can always check out our online shop where there is loads of goods, guitar-y, ukulele-y, mandolin-y, banjo-y, amplifier-y stuff. Loads of good musical goodness on there, so go and check it out. Thanks very much for watching. I will see you all soon.